back in the garage yet again. It is a frosty negative whatever outside, -4 degrees outside. Fortunately, the garage setup where we're at does have the heater going, so it's much more comfortable in here than working outside. What I have going on right now is I'm actually taking the upper and lower control arm. This bar right here is the upper control arm. This is the upper control arm. This is the lower control arm. And these two basically hold the spindle or the knuckle in place. There is a shock in here that allows the four-wheeler to basically free pivot like this. And what we are doing is we're going to take these two pieces off and take it to the table. We're going to try cutting off 1 inch off of both control arm. That way we can try shortening the width. Now there's two different ways that I had visualized for this build. One was to recycle the old control arms and then cut them down. The second was to use a solid I-beam axle, kind of like off the old Ford Roadsters or classic cars. The reason why I'm trying to do this with this is just one, to see how narrow I can do it with still having the control arms functioning, and two, as far as the aesthetics of the whole build itself, once I do the solid I-beam axle, if it doesn't quite look right with the way the frame is right now, plus the frame that I will be building, we may end up going with the control arms. But I wanted to have a plan B just in case if this didn't work out. So we're going to go ahead and take this one off. We already took the first one off on this side. We're going to take this one off here, and then we'll go over to the table and do some work. Okay, the lower control arm is off. Now the funny thing is I've known cars that come apart easier than this thing. There we go. Okay, let's go over here. So, I have the control arms off. Let's lay this in a way to where we won't lose stuff. The other set of control arms I already cut down, but I kind of wanted to compare the two. The way that I did this is I cut 1 inch off of both of them. The welds on here look extremely primitive right now. I haven't cleaned them up yet. But what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to take the bushings off of this end, since these are made out of nylon bushing. If I weld here, these bushings will actually melt. So I'll need to use a screwdriver to basically pry these off and then pull them out. It looks like this on the inside. It looks like this going through here on the inside. Once I have those off, I'll use the chop saw, cut it straight across from here, or use the grinder with the cutting wheel to cut these welds off, clean up this bar, cut off 1 inch, and then re-weld this back in the same place to where it'll actually end up this much smaller, so they're matching. And then of course cleaning up my weld. The things that I need to really be concerned about, I will need to use my square, and the reason I need to use my square is making sure that the matching points for that hold the spindle or the knuckle into place line up on both sides. So I'm going to actually take my square and line it up with this back edge of this bar across here. And if I use this edge of the square, it will tell me where this top point should line up for when I weld this back on. It needs to be lined up on the top and on the bottom. So I'll make a little wax mark like that for where this point needs to line up here. I'll make one more for where the bottom needs to line up. That way when I cut this off, that these points will always meet back with each other each time. And if they're not lined up properly, then the knuckle will actually either it won't line up right because it'll be crooked. Put my scratch into the paint right there, and then I'll do one on the bottom. Oops. If I can keep it from moving, as well as still allow the camera to see what the heck I'm doing. And this is the part we cut off. Obviously we need to clean up the burrs that are on there, as well as grind off the paint, since the paint will prevent us from getting a decent bond. Put them side by side, and it should be parallel to each other. It'll look like that. Yep, that looks good. Okay, so I got all my pieces cut. Now I need to actually clean off not only the previous welds that were on there, since I cut this one on the welds. Need to clean this up, that way it lines on there straight. I also have to clean up the burrs on these stem pieces here using the mega grinder, as I like to call it.
Okay, it's recording.
Okay, so now that we have the material cleaned up, I lined everything up on the table. We're using a metal table, so the material should be grounded off of the electrode that's on the corner of the table. So I'm going to go ahead and try to tack weld this into place. We're going to put it back on, make sure that it articulates the way it should, and then if it's good, then it's good. Here we go. We have it back in mock-up stage after tack welding it together. Basically what we're checking to make sure that the control arms articulate freely is the biggest thing after modifying by shortening them. We want to make sure that they go all the way up, which they do, and then go all the way down, which they do. And these actually articulate considerably better than what they did before, because before they would not articulate this high. The other thing we were looking at is, as far as the width goes, we took off 2 inches, an inch off both sides, so 2 inches. And then with the car tires that we're going to put on here, these will actually be in farther, so we're actually in the appropriate width. So now all we need to do now is take both the upper and lower control arm back off again, and then I need to finally weld these in, because I only put 4 tack welds on each point, so there's gaps in between here. I'll clean this up and then do a straight weld going all the way around on the 4 connecting points. But other than that, the control arms are done. But we haven't put the right side one on yet. The left side one, we're going to finish up here in a moment, but they both articulate freely like they should, which is actually really great. So the tiny car won't need to articulate like this, but it's, you know, does anything need to do anything? You know, so if we do take our tiny car four-wheeling across a tiny creek somewhere that has tiny boulders that we wish to drive over, it will be able to drive over such tiny boulders. So we'll see what happens. But we're going to take this apart, re-weld it, put it back on, and then we'll be done.